Pentecostalism is one of the biggest streams of Christianity, and with its 600 million believers, it actually represents 8% of the world's population. And one of the things that really characterize Pentecostals is that they tend to speak in tongues, which basically means that they speak a language that they cannot understand themselves. And the question is, of course, why on earth are they doing this, since other Christians tend to speak languages that are understandable? There's only one way to find out: through economics. So, in the beginning of the 20th century, tongues was an extremely rare commodity. But then demand to have the gift of tongues increased rapidly, basically because of literacy. People had already had access to Bibles in their own languages for centuries, but now they actually started to be able to read it. Since, because of the economic development, they did not have to work in a factory 20 hours a day, and they actually were able to read because of education. So when the laymen and ordinary people started to read the Bible, they discovered this ancient gift of tongues, which makes you able to speak another language supernaturally. And the demand grew higher and higher, and thousands of Christians all over the world started to pray to receive this gift, but yet there were no supply. Until in 1906, a small group of Christians finally found the miraculous supply of tongues. So they gathered in this warehouse on Azusa Street in Los Angeles, and thousands of people came to consume this gift. And since the commodity was extracted from the invisible hand above, it was basically limitless when it comes to scarcity. But since there at that time only was basically one place where you could get this, the supply was really small. And of course, the small supply and the big demand made the price to become a Pentecostal very extensive. The Los Angeles Times described the Pentecostals as maniacs that were using this weird babbling of tongues, and their fellow Christian brothers and sisters in the evangelical movement said that they were possessed by Satan. So the Pentecostals had to make this cost-benefit analysis to see if it really was worth to be called a possessed lunatic in order to receive this community. But actually quite a lot of them decided that yes, it is. And one of the reasons that this product became so popular was that it didn't just have an intrinsic utility, but it could actually be used as a means for production of other goods. Especially something that is really valuable for a lot of Christians, namely evangelism. You see, according to the early Pentecostals, they thought that quite a lot of times they were actually speaking in existing foreign languages when they were using this tongues language. Through their newspaper, The Apostolic Faith, which they used for marketing, the Azusa Street Mission told this story. Sister Hutchin has been preaching the gospel in the power of the Spirit. She has received the baptism with the Holy Ghost and the gift of the Uganda language, the language of the people to whom she is sent. Our brother who has been in that country understands and has interpreted the language she speaks. Her husband is with her, and her niece, who also has been given the African language. And naturally, this reputation increased the incentives to have this wonderful gift even more. I mean, imagine how efficient it is to, instead of going to class for months and years, you just get another language from the invisible hand. The reputation of this utility increased the demand even more, and then other places as well started to supply this gift through prayer. And those places are what we today call Pentecostal churches. So the Pentecostal and Charismatic movement grew rapidly throughout the world, and with it, of course, the gift of tongues. So that we today have 500 million Pentecostals and Charismatics compared to the 12 people that met on Azusa Street in 1906. And this, of course, is a growth rate that even China cannot compete with. But over the years, the gift of tongues became more and more cheap, since persecution basically disappeared. And this was also reflected in the quality of the product. Nowadays, when Pentecostals speak in tongues, they do not do it in the Uganda language. They rather talk a language that only the invisible hand understands. And what can explain this shift from primarily being a tool for evangelism to being a tool for praying? Well, of course, it can only be explained by economic development. During this 100 years, basically all people in the Western world received good education. Internet tools like Google Translate has made it extremely easy to communicate with people even though you don't know the language. And of course, English has become an extremely popular lingua franca all over the world. So basically there are not so many incentives left for Christians to learn other languages supernaturally, except that it's extremely cool. cool. And it's further strengthened by the fact that in non-Western countries with lower economic standards, this original aspect of tongues is still quite prevalent. Like Pastor Surprise Itoli in South Africa, who actually claims that he has learned several supernatural languages from the invisible hand, including English. And of course you may think whatever about that, but my point is that it seems to have a class aspect when it comes to the utility of speaking in tongues. It seems like poor people want to use it as a way to communicate, and rich people want to use it as the way to pray, since they can communicate with people anyways. Alright, that was my take on trying to explain the gift of tongues from an economic perspective. I hope it was enjoyable and informative, and that it clearly shows that economic theories cannot explain everything really. Have a nice day and God bless you.